For centuries, we thought we knew who the Celts were, a mysterious people of ancient Europe, warriors who lived among mist-covered hills, built fortified settlements, worshipped forgotten gods, and left behind a cultural legacy that still echoes across Britain, Ireland, France, and beyond. But there is a problem with that story. The Celts may never have been one people. The history books often give us a simple picture: one ancient population, one homeland, one great migration, one Celtic identity spreading across Europe. It is an image that is easy to understand, but ancient history is rarely that simple. Because when scientists began looking beneath ancient burial sites, beneath the soil, beneath the bones, and beneath thousands of years of history, they found something unexpected. The DNA did not reveal one single Celtic signature. Instead, it revealed movement, mixture, population change, and connections between people who may have lived hundreds of miles and sometimes centuries apart. So what if the people we call the Celts were never a single genetic population at all? What if Celtic identity was something that developed through language, culture, migration, trade, political relationships, and generations of human interaction? And if that is true, then one of Europe's most enduring cultural identities may have a very different origin story from the one we have been telling for generations. Because the real mystery is not simply where the Celts came from, it is this: who were the Celts, really? And what can their DNA reveal about a past that written history only partially remembers? Who were the Celts? It sounds like a simple question, but the deeper historians, archaeologists, and geneticists look, the more complicated the answer becomes. For centuries, the word Celt has been used to describe ancient peoples who lived across enormous parts of Europe. From the windswept islands of Britain and Ireland to ancient Gaul, Central Europe, and parts of the Iberian Peninsula, communities associated with Celtic languages and cultural traditions existed across a vast and changing landscape. Ancient Greek and Roman writers used terms such as Keltoi and Celtae to describe certain peoples of Europe. But an important question remains: did all of these communities think of themselves as members of one enormous Celtic nation? There is no simple evidence that they did. In fact, the ancient world was filled with local identities, tribal loyalties, political alliances, languages, and regional traditions. The word Celt may therefore tell us something useful about culture and language without necessarily describing one unified biological population. And that distinction is incredibly important, because the word Celtic can refer to several different things. It can refer to language, it can refer to cultural traditions, it can refer to archaeological patterns, it can refer to political or tribal identities. And in the modern world, it can even refer to ideas about ancestry. But these categories are not interchangeable. A language can spread without an entire population moving. A religious tradition can be adopted by neighboring communities. A style of art can travel hundreds of miles through trade and cultural exchange. And a political identity can unite people who do not share identical ancestry. So we have to be careful, because sharing a culture does not automatically mean sharing the same ancestors. And sharing ancestry does not automatically mean sharing the same culture. This is where the Celtic mystery begins. For a long time, popular history offered an elegant explanation. Somewhere in ancient Central Europe, a distinctive Celtic population emerged. Over generations, that population expanded. It moved westward and northward. It reached France. It reached Britain and Ireland. It interacted with communities in Iberia. And eventually, the Celtic world appeared across large portions of Europe. One people, one homeland, one great migration, one identity. It is a powerful story. It is also probably too simple, because archaeology has repeatedly shown us that ancient communities could share remarkable similarities without necessarily coming from one recent population. They could use similar artistic designs. They could build similar weapons. They could practice related burial traditions. They could exchange technologies. They could share religious ideas. But how did those similarities spread? Did people move? Did ideas move? Did both happen? Imagine two communities hundreds of miles apart, using similar designs. Perhaps one population migrated into the territory of another. Perhaps they shared older ancestry. Perhaps merchants carried objects and ideas between them. Perhaps families intermarried. Perhaps one community simply adopted traditions from its neighbors. Several explanations can produce similar archaeological evidence, and that is why the old map begins to crack. Instead of imagining one enormous Celtic population spreading across Europe, we begin to see something more complicated. Different peoples, different origins, different histories, connected by networks of culture, language, trade, migration, and political interaction. Perhaps the mistake was assuming that a cultural phenomenon had to be a single biological population. And to investigate that possibility, scientists needed evidence that archaeology alone could not always provide. They needed to look inside the bones. For thousands of years, the dead remained silent. Their bones could reveal their age. Their graves could reveal how they were buried. Their weapons, jewelry, tools, and other possessions could tell us something about how they lived. But there was one question archaeology often struggled to answer. Where did these people come from? Then ancient DNA changed the investigation. Under the right conditions, fragments of genetic material can survive inside ancient human remains. Modern sequencing technology allows researchers to recover and compare some of this genetic information. And suddenly, ancient populations could be studied in an entirely new way. Scientists could compare individuals separated by generations. They could examine populations separated by centuries. They could identify patterns suggesting migration, genetic continuity, and mixture. And they could ask questions that once seemed almost impossible. Who moved? Who stayed? Who mixed? Which populations expanded? Which populations declined? And when a new culture appeared in the archaeological record, did new people arrive? Or did people who were already living there simply adopt new ideas? The answers are not always simple. DNA cannot tell us everything about an ancient person. It cannot automatically tell us what language they spoke. It cannot tell us exactly which gods they worshipped. And it cannot simply look at an ancient skeleton and stamp the word Celtic onto it. But DNA can reveal patterns of ancestry. It can provide evidence of population movement. It can show relationships between ancient individuals and populations. And sometimes, it can reveal changes that are difficult to see from artifacts alone. This creates a fascinating tension. Archaeology may tell us that something changed. Genetics can then ask a deeper question. Did the people change too? If genetic evidence shows substantial population movement, migration becomes part of the explanation. If there is strong genetic continuity, cultural change may have happened without large-scale population replacement. And when the evidence shows mixture, the story becomes more complicated still. Perhaps nobody simply replaced anybody. Perhaps generations of people met, moved, married, traded, adopted new traditions, and created something new. And that possibility becomes especially important when we look at prehistoric Europe. Because long before the people we call Celtic appeared in the historical record, Europe had already experienced enormous demographic changes. Europe was never genetically static. Thousands of years ago, hunter-gatherer communities occupied different parts of the continent. Then farming populations expanded from regions to the southeast, bringing new ways of life and contributing to major demographic transformations. Later, populations associated with the Eurasian steppe expanded westward during the Copper and Bronze Ages. These movements left lasting genetic traces across large parts of Europe. Then came the Bronze Age. New communities, new technologies, new trade networks, new patterns of migration, new mixtures of ancestry, and eventually the Iron Age. By then, Europe was not an untouched landscape waiting for the Celts to arrive. It was already a deeply layered human world. Generation after generation had inherited pieces of earlier migrations. Some populations remained where they had lived for long periods. Others moved. Some mixed with newcomers. Some communities changed their cultural identities, and some eventually disappeared as distinct populations. This changes the Celtic question completely, because when we look at an Iron Age community and describe it as Celtic, we are looking at one layer of a story that began thousands of years earlier. The people who lived in the Celtic-speaking world did not suddenly appear from nowhere. They inherited ancestry from populations that had already crossed and reshaped Europe long before the word Celt entered the historical record. So Europe was never a static collection of isolated peoples. It was a moving landscape. People moved, Languages changed, cultures spread, families mixed, political boundaries shifted, and identities evolved. By the time Celtic-speaking communities entered the historical record, Europe had already been transformed many times. The Celts were not the beginning of Europe's story. They were another chapter in a much older story. And now we can ask what happened when those ancient layers came together. By the Iron Age, communities associated with Celtic languages and cultures existed across several regions of Europe. But genetic studies do not point to one universal Celtic genetic signature. Instead, ancient individuals from different regions reveal variation. They were connected in some ways, but they were not genetically identical. Their ancestry could differ according to geography, migration history, population mixing, and local continuity. This is one of the most important clues in the entire investigation. If the Celts had been one genetically unified population, we might expect to find a clear and consistent genetic pattern across every region associated with Celtic culture. But human history rarely produces such clean boundaries. Instead, we find populations with different combinations of ancestry. And this forces us to separate two things that are often confused: culture and genetics. Culture includes art, language, weapons, religious practices, traditions, social customs. Genetics tells us about ancestry, population movement, genetic mixture, and biological relationships. The archaeological record can show us what people created and how they lived. DNA can sometimes tell us something about where some of their ancestors came from and how populations changed. But those stories do not always match perfectly. A community can adopt a new cultural identity without being genetically replaced. A population can move into a region and adopt traditions that already existed there. Neighboring communities can share cultural practices while remaining genetically different. So when we ask what Celtic people looked like genetically, the most honest answer may be that there was no single answer. There was no universal genetic barcode stamped onto every person we would later call Celtic. There were populations. There were migrations, there was mixture, there was regional continuity, and there were cultures that crossed biological boundaries. The Celtic world may therefore have been less like a single family tree, and more like a vast, tangled forest. And nowhere is that complexity more revealing than Britain. For generations, popular history imagined Celtic Britain as the result of a great migration. Groups arriving from continental Europe, new warriors crossing the Channel, an older population pushed aside, and a new Celtic population taking its place. It is a dramatic story, but ancient DNA has made the demographic history of Britain much more complicated. Genetic evidence indicates substantial population movement into Britain around the transition from the Bronze Age toward the Iron Age. That tells us something important. People really were moving, but movement does not automatically mean invasion. And it certainly does not mean that an entire population was simply wiped out overnight. There is a major difference between an invasion and generations of migration. An invasion is a dramatic event. An army arrives, a territory falls, a political order changes. But migration can look very different. People arrive gradually. They settle, they trade, they form families, they have children, they interact with communities that were already there. And over generations, the population changes. That distinction is crucial. Because the genetic evidence does not simply tell us that a new people arrived and replaced everyone who came before. It tells us that Britain's population history changed. And that leaves us with a much more interesting question. Was Celtic Britain created by invasion, or was it shaped through generations of migration and integration? The answer may not be one or the other. Perhaps people moved. Perhaps populations mixed. Perhaps cultural identities changed along the way, and perhaps what eventually became Celtic Britain was influenced by all of these processes. The DNA does not give us a simple invasion story. It gives us something much more human. People arriving, people staying, people meeting, people mixing, generations passing, and identities changing. If culture can spread without an entire population being replaced, then the old Celtic invasion story begins to look very different. For generations, there was an easy way to imagine the rise of Celtic Europe. One enormous migration, one powerful population, moving across the continent, bringing its language, customs, beliefs, and identity with it. It is dramatic, it is easy to visualize, and it is also far too simple, because there is a fundamental difference between mass migration and cultural transmission. Mass migration means people move, populations expand, new communities settle in new territories. Cultural transmission is different. Ideas move, languages move, religious traditions move, technologies move, artistic styles move, and people can adopt those things without being replaced. Think of it like a wave. The culture spreads across the landscape, but underneath that wave, the people may remain remarkably diverse. A community could adopt a Celtic language. Another could embrace similar artistic traditions. A neighboring population could trade with Celtic-speaking groups. Families could intermarry. Religious practices could be shared. Political relationships could bring communities together. And none of that necessarily requires an entire population to disappear. The emergence of Celtic identity may therefore have involved many forces working together: migration, intermarriage, cultural adoption, language transmission, political expansion, trade, and regional continuity. Not one giant wave, but countless smaller movements and connections unfolding over generations. And this changes the story dramatically. The question is no longer simply, when did the Celts invade Europe? It becomes, how did Celtic languages and cultures become powerful enough to connect people who may not have shared the same ancestry? Because culture can travel without everyone carrying the same ancestry. And if that is true, then the Celtic world was not necessarily created by one population replacing another. It may have been created through thousands of encounters between people. And that brings us to one of the most revealing questions in the entire investigation. If there was no single Celtic genetic signature, then what does Celtic DNA actually mean? After all these migrations, mixtures, and cultural exchanges, we arrive at the intellectual center of the mystery. What exactly is Celtic DNA? To understand that question, we have to separate four ideas: ancestry, language, culture, identity. They may sound like different pieces of the same puzzle, but they are not the same thing. DNA can reveal patterns of ancestry. It can help scientists identify relationships between ancient populations. It can show that certain communities experienced migration, mixture, or genetic continuity. But DNA cannot look at an ancient skeleton and simply say, this person was Celtic. Why? Because being Celtic was not necessarily a biological category. It could involve language, culture, community, political allegiance, tradition, or identity. Imagine a person living in an ancient community associated with Celtic culture. Their ancestors may have arrived from somewhere else generations earlier. They may have spoken a Celtic language. They may have practiced local religious traditions. They may have used Celtic artistic styles. And they may have considered themselves part of that community. Their DNA, however, could reflect a much older and more complicated history. And the opposite could also be true. A person might carry ancestry associated with regions where Celtic languages were spoken without necessarily identifying with Celtic culture. This is why the phrase Celtic DNA can be misleading. It can make ancestry, language, culture, and identity appear as though they are all encoded in one genetic signature. They are not. DNA can reveal ancestry, but it cannot by itself tell us what language someone spoke. It cannot tell us which gods they worshipped. It cannot tell us which traditions they followed, and it cannot tell us exactly how they understood their own identity. That may be the biggest revelation of all. The Celts may not be a genetic category waiting to be discovered. They may be a historical and cultural story created through the interaction of many different populations. So the real mystery is not whether DNA can prove who was Celtic. It is how so many different people became part of the world we now call Celtic. And once we ask that question, the entire investigation changes. At the beginning, we asked, where did the Celts come from? Now we have to ask something much harder. What exactly do we mean when we say Celtic? There are several possibilities. The first is that large-scale population movements played an important role. Groups moved across Europe. They carried languages, traditions, technologies, and cultural practices with them. Over generations, those migrations helped create what became the Celtic world. But migration may not be the entire explanation. The second possibility is that Celtic identity spread more like a cultural network than a single migration. Different populations became connected through trade, language, religion, political relationships, intermarriage, and shared traditions. People did not necessarily have to come from the same place to become part of the same cultural world. And then there is a third possibility, a combination of both. Migration mattered, but so did cultural transformation, so did regional continuity, so did intermarriage, so did the exchange of ideas. Perhaps the Celtic world emerged through generations of movement and interaction between populations that were never completely genetically identical. And this may explain why the DNA evidence looks so complicated, because we are not necessarily looking for one people. We are looking at the consequences of many peoples interacting over a very long period of time. The evidence does not give us a single Celtic origin story. It gives us something more unsettling. A puzzle scattered across ancient graves, forgotten settlements, fragments of language, archaeological remains, and millions of pieces of genetic information. And perhaps the most honest conclusion is this: the Celts were not simply one thing. They were part of a changing Europe, a Europe shaped by movement, migration, continuity, mixture, language, culture, and identity. So what did the DNA actually change about the story we thought we knew? Did it prove that the history books were completely wrong? Not exactly. What it did was far more interesting. It made the story harder to simplify. The ancient world was never divided into neat ethnic boxes. There were no perfectly isolated populations whose boundaries remained unchanged for thousands of years. People moved, families mixed, languages spread, cultures transformed, communities disappeared, others emerged, and sometimes different traditions came together to create something new. A person could inherit ancestry from people who had arrived generations earlier. They could speak a language that had crossed borders. They could live within a culture that had absorbed traditions from several different communities. That means the people we call Celtic were not standing outside the rest of European history. They were part of it. They inherited the consequences of everything that came before them, and they passed those influences forward. So perhaps the greatest revelation is not that the history books were completely wrong. Perhaps they were simply too simple. The old story gave us a single map. The evidence gives us layers: migration, continuity, mixture, culture, language, identity. And somewhere within all those layers is the story of the people we now call the Celts. Not one bloodline, not one migration, not one simple origin, but a human story shaped by movement and connection. And perhaps that is what ancient DNA has really changed. Not our fascination with the Celts, but our understanding of what it means to belong to a people. Because for centuries, we searched for the homeland of the Celts. One place, one beginning, one ancestral source. But perhaps we were asking the wrong question. Because the Celts may not have been one people who simply moved across Europe. They may have been something far more complicated. A cultural legacy created through generations of migration, intermarriage, trade, language, tradition, political relationships, and human connection. Many peoples, many journeys, many ancestral histories, and eventually a shared cultural world. Perhaps that is why the Celtic mystery has survived for so long. Because the question was never simply about blood. It was about identity. It was about how people become connected, and how those connections survive long after the people themselves are gone. The old map disappears. The genetic patterns remain. History remembers names. DNA remembers populations. And somewhere between the two lies a story Europe has been trying to reconstruct for thousands of years. So perhaps the real mystery is not who were the Celts. Perhaps it is this: how many different stories had to come together before the world began calling them Celtic? The evidence is still being uncovered. The questions are still being debated. And every new ancient genome has the potential to add another piece to the puzzle. If you want more investigations into the mysteries hidden beneath our ancient history, subscribe to Shadow Case Files. And tell us in the comments, were the Celts a distinct people? Or were they a cultural identity created and transformed by many different populations? Because the past is never as simple as we were told. History remembers the names. Archaeology preserves the traces. DNA reveals fragments of ancestry. But somewhere between all three lies the human story. And that story is still waiting to be uncovered. This is Shadow Case Files.